This is how it goes down.
No More Heroes is a video game that has you ascending the ranks of an assassin organization with a cheap Katana you got off an auction while constantly being scammed to do menial labor in order to unlock the next cool boss fight. No More Heroes rocks. The thing about No More Heroes though is that it's a game that works on a bizarre level of opposites. The combat and boss fights are the highlight, but you'll spend the majority of the game mowing lawns, picking up trash, and defusing mines at a beach. Travis Touchdown is a loser, but he's an endearing loser that you can't help but love even when he's being a gigantic asshole for next to no reason. The story has these moments where you expect Travis to learn a lesson or become a more enlightened person, but at nearly every turn, he reverts back to one goal: being the best. Being the best at any cost is what No More Heroes tasks you with achieving. Sometimes you'll have to get your hands dirty, but it's all worth it for that oh so prestigious #1 spot, right? Well, why does any of this matter? Seriously, why should I care about any of what's going on? The answer is, I don't know, but I do. The goal of being the best, of being #1 it's too enticing to turn down. So that's what I'm gonna do. Power fantasy. You know, video game protagonists are really funny when you think about it, especially in games that are localized entirely within the idea of a power fantasy. You assume the role of someone that doesn't even care about the world burning, as long as it looks funny in the process. Most action games live in this world where you're supposed to feel powerful. There's nothing anyone can do to stop you. You can fling people around like they're nothing except things to turn to mulch. And even when things get difficult, the journey is still focused on learning how to squash anything in your way. It's kind of messed up when you think about it for too long, but at the same time, it's great for letting out some stress when you come home from a long day and want to absolutely eviscerate something. Maybe projecting someone onto that something. Maybe, perhaps. No More Heroes is one of the action games rooted in power fantasy, giving you the means to shred tissue paper enemies into goo and a shower of blood. Here's a contract where you have to kill 100 enemies for some pocket change so you can go buy a cool new jacket. Fuck yeah. Like I said though, No More Heroes is about opposites, and even though this game is a power fantasy, it's also a mockery of power fantasies too. The cover is Travis Touchdown holding the waist of Sylvia Christel, because he's the main character, so of course he'll get the girl, right? Well no, this cover is projection to the nth degree. Nearly everything about No More Heroes' presentation is there to sell you on the power fantasy of Travis Touchdown, but you'll realize pretty quickly that things aren't that straightforward. The opening sets everything up perfectly. Travis Touchdown leaves his motel to go on his next job. By the start of the story, Travis has already taken out Helter Skelter, the 11th ranked assassin, and the tutorial has him going up against Mr. 10th place, Death Metal. Metal's mention proves the assassins must live pretty comfortable lives when they reach a certain level of infamy. But a place like this just makes someone like Death Metal an easy target for an insane nerd with an addiction to jerking it. And by it, well, let's just say my Tsubaki Mark III. It's a fact that I think we all acknowledge as being hilarious, but sincerely, the fact that this is a Wii game is so funny. Obviously, I'm not playing it on my Wii at the moment. This is the Switch version, which might be even funnier because now you have the opportunity to charge your Tsubaki Mark III on the bus. We are way past the need to exclaim that the Wii was not just a console for family-friendly video games, nor was it a place that only offered boring, safe experiences. No More Heroes is emblematic of the fact that the Nintendo Wii was awesome. One minute you could be beating the meat of another guy in Wii Sports Boxing, and then the next you could slice the meat of a guy in No More Heroes. Lots of meat being thrown around.
Nice.
Everything about this opening is done to make you and Travis feel like the guy, the person who will make it to rank #1 without letting anything get in the way. Of course, before we actually fight Death Metal, we should absolutely take a massive shit. No More Heroes' combat is tactile and pretty merciless at times. Enemies will absolutely take nearly any opportunity that they have to take a swing at Travis. Luckily, the beam katana is faster than them usually by a little bit. Well, depending on the model you use anyway. Each major upgrade of the beam katana has different attack animations, and the best weapon in the game is actually kind of awkward to use due to Travis insisting on being a flashy diva with it. You get high attacks and low attacks to strike wherever an enemy has left themselves open. Mid-combo, you can switch between high and low simply by alternating the high and low attack button. Though if an enemy's guard is particularly stubborn, you can kick to stun them and use Travis's knowledge of his real love in life, professional wrestling. To say that combat against most of the common enemies is easy is kind of an understatement, because you really do tear through them like they are nothing. And this isn't even counting the times when you've got a power-up coursing through your veins, giving you insta-kills galore. The pace of combat is what makes this fun though, as enemies will try to catch you off guard sometimes, maybe by flanking you or just being aggressive, or by attacking at the same time as you, so you both enter a locking contest. If there's any way to describe the way that No More Heroes feels to play, it would be that it feels kind of dog shit, but in a really fun and endearing way. This isn't a game you'll ever see in the same kind of conversations as a Ninja Gaiden, a Devil May Cry, or a Chaos Legion maybe. Does any of that matter? No, but it is worth mentioning that this boat has a few holes in a few places. That also doesn't mean that the game isn't fun as hell at times. Boss fights are mostly a very good time that have you finding the cracks in an assassin's armor, figuring out when they're vulnerable for an attack or getting them to block so that you can stun them and follow up with a sick wrestling move. Travis's tools are limited, far more than some of the assassins he faces that have tons of their own tricks, but fighting honestly against people that do whatever they can to cheat and win feels like the honorable thing for an otaku to do, I guess. Going off to do training before the next big fight is also very fun, and I wish more action games had you going to the gym to gain a defense boost. Dante absolutely has to lift at some point. Can we at least see him do it? No, of course we can't. See the mirror, you'll see the fool. Travis gets some fun utilities by training with a weird guy he meets in a bar, like combo extenders, a lunging move that closes a gap, and a couple other things I don't think I use very much. Common battles are an exercise in Travis exerting his ego upon the world. In this way, he shows how badass and cool he is by killing anyone that gets in his way. Boss fights are moments for Travis to prove his worth to an equal, and show why he should be taken seriously as a competitor. But after every major job, Travis comes home to his motel and eagerly awaits his chance to take down the next assassin. Of course, he has to pay up a ton of money in order to do so, and so comes the real meat of No More Heroes' playtime. Travis has his otaku den, a motel room that he's fashioned to be a permanent living space. It's a mess, except for the anime figures he displays with such purpose. His illustrious beam saber is unceremoniously shoved in a drawer under his bed, where I am sure they bang into each other as he pulls the drawer out. Man, those are gonna get scuffed to hell. Why are you living like this? Travis is, in every respect, kind of a loser, but if he's going to get anywhere in life, he has to get money, so it's time to mow some lawns. Menial labor like this isn't exactly rare to see in the entirety of the video game landscape. How many times have you voluntarily cleared a grass patch in a Zelda game? I bet you feel pretty silly right now, huh? But it is kind of crazy that you mow the lawn in order to move on and do more cool levels. Even these activities are still gamified though, with most of them having time limits or records to beat. And even though they're, as if by design, kind of boring to do, the contrast between this and that is too interesting and funny to not love by the end. It's also kind of endearing that Travis has to work part-time gigs like this to be able to pay off the United Assassins Association. He has to earn capital to then earn his place amongst a den of murderers. Somewhere along the way, there's got to be a realization from Travis that maybe something about this isn't quite right. Why would an assassin's conglomerate have a ranking system in place that was simply designed for their top guys and gals to eventually be murdered and replaced with new top guys and gals that'll eventually be replaced with new top guys and gals? Honestly, the biggest criticism I have against No More Heroes is that the game doesn't force you to do more boring menial labor. The fact that you can ignore most of the regular jobs at a certain point and go for the combat-based challenge challenges to raise money instead seems a bit strange. To me, the greatest thing about experiencing No More Heroes is this dichotomy between insane power fantasy and the harsh, boring reality that a life like this requires. Killing indiscriminate amounts of people shouldn't really earn you any money in any context in this game. You should be made to feel excruciatingly bored for the majority of the playtime, but I know that's a little unrealistic to expect. Luckily, all the jobs you take on are pretty ridiculous by and large, either for how mundane they are in a world where assassins have access to Death Star laser beams, or for how they're even more insane than some of the assassins themselves. There's a series of contracts you can take on that have you killing a specific target, with the catch that there's about 15 other guys in the room with you that want to see nothing but your dead body. What this turns into is a mosh pit death fest where you either catch them off guard and kill your target with ease, or get stomped to the ground for even bothering to try. I don't think it's really intentional or anything, but I think a lot about 13 when I'm playing No More Heroes. Obviously both are cel-shaded games, but there's next to no similarity in approach really. It does make for a fun comparison though to see how two different games can operate with cel-shaded styles. 13 leans way more into the comic concept with a step-by-step window of sick headshots you perform and the tap 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 of approaching enemies in stealth sections. 13 uses the dressings of comics and cel shading to add flourishes to the gameplay you expect to see from this art style. No More Heroes steps away from that idea a little bit to ground its world to the floor just that little more. In fact, I don't think No More Heroes' cel shading really comes from a comic book style. It actually reminds me way more of the Technicolor dynamism of Dirty Harry, whose sharp lighting and deep contrast echo the sort of look that No More Heroes ends up going for. Suda51 did say that Dirty Harry was an inspiration for Santa Destroy itself, so I do wonder if it extended into the art style too. Looking at it from this perspective, the aesthetic makes way more sense to me, as the art style tries to mix the gritty textures of realism with that of a more colorful cel-shaded style. The visual palette of No More Heroes isn't inspired by just one thing though, that's important to remember. There are dozens of influences cascading on top of each other here, and we'd be here all day if I tried to list every single one of them right now. The thing to remember is that No More Heroes is rooted in an 80s and 90s punk sort of aesthetic more than anything else. No More Heroes is derived from the song by the Stranglers called No More Heroes, and if you listen to the song you can really hear where a lot of the little stingers and musical inspirations come from. This punk aesthetic is born of one where the act itself doesn't really care or give much of a shit about their presentation. Part of the art is making it look cool by it being sloppy, by staring at the establishment and rule sets and pissing all over those concepts. The point of punk is to take a stand and make your point known to the world in a way that defies convention and expectation. No More Heroes is both a parody of this aesthetic while also being arguably the most respectful of it I've ever seen a video game be. Because I think it is about the balance of respect and irreverence. It's about proudly being a punk while mocking the marketability of punk culture. So what we've got here is a game that absolutely loves to pay homage to the culture of video games while also being more than ready to poke fun at things that most video games do. There's a reason most of the game's coolest t-shirts are found in dumpsters. It's a very fun collectible that has a genuine value, but it's still an activity in a video game that's not necessarily super interesting. Yet a lot of people will go out of their way to gobble these up anyway. I know I did. And I don't think there's a super important deep reasoning for this. I think Suda51 and the dev team just thought it'd be funny for players to fetch collectibles out of trash cans. I suppose then that part of the power fantasy here is rooted in comedy. For every badass cutscene, there's a moment or detail you'll notice that sort of undercuts that moment. You may spend hours tinkering with Travis's look, only to then willfully throw it away when you find the perfectly goofy t-shirt. There comes a point though when you do have to think about what the point of all this is when you're 8 hours deep. Maybe the routine of mowing the lawn is getting old. Maybe spamming the same side activity for the monies is getting a little old and you just want to get to the next boss fight. Well, that's when the point sort of reveals itself in a way that both defies and meets my expectations. Growth. Becoming more and more powerful, gaining more money, more clothes, better weapons, more respect. But after it's all said and done, getting all of those things results in next to no change for Travis. He can work to get as much money as he wants, but the majority of it will be gone by the time he's bought the right to face the next assassin and gotten ready to do so. In almost every encounter with an assassin, it feels like Travis should have maybe died at least once somehow, some way. So he's not necessarily learning much from each fight he takes part in, and really, the only friend Travis actually has in this game is the DVD rental store guy. That and the girl who goes straight to his answering machine requesting that Travis please return the porno DVDs that he never gives back. Every assassin fight ends in Travis coming back home to his motel and starting the loop over and over and over again. Obviously, the loop is fun. That's the main reason why we, the player, want to play this game. It's fun to do everything. Well, almost everything. I wouldn't say driving around town necessarily feels all that great. But there was a point in the story where I wondered where this was all going. We see glimpses of Travis maybe being an alright guy with the rank 8 battle against Shinobu, where Travis spares her life after defeating her. But then when Travis faces off against Holly Summers for the rank 6 battle and spares her too, you kinda realize that this is Travis defaulting to a bullshit, chivalrous persona. But there's that interesting possibility that there's more to it than that, right? Maybe Travis Touchdown is more than we see him as. The answer is no. Travis is only doing this because he thinks it makes him look cool as hell. But maybe there's that little spark in him that could be something more. But nah, not really. But maybe... The point though is that none of this actually matters. There's not really a journey going on here. The end of the story introduces a whole revenge angle that Travis wants to kill his half-sister Jean for murdering his parents, and it was pretty easy for Sylvia, the local con artist, to construct an elaborate world around Travis that would not only net Sylvia a ton of cash, but train Travis up to take on someone who was much better than him. Jean is revealed to be the main bad guy of the story, or rather the main obstacle for Travis to overcome at the very end of the narrative. You never see Jean for the entire runtime of the game until this very moment, and the only Jean you know is Travis's pet cat. You don't know who this person is or why we should even be fighting her until about 30 seconds before the fight begins. But again, none of this is really a big deal. The whys, whats, hows, and whens of the narrative don't matter that much, yet they do exist for those that seek it out. Jean explains her entire backstory to Travis, but that's all skipped over because it's not really why you're here. Or rather, the game is built around you not giving much of a shit. Travis doesn't have the capacity to truly understand any of what Jean is saying anyway. No matter what words are said, this moment between the two of them on an empty highway in the middle of nowhere is what the game has come to. It's what you've been trained for, and we're going to see it through. Suda51 mocks action games and their spectacle by the end. It mocks the idea of a tragic backstory involving sexual assault, jacking up the age rating of a game made for the Nintendo Wii, a game that already has you jerking a controller and turning enemies into puddles of blood onto the floor. No More Heroes is basically telling you to your face that you can't handle things that pop culture hasn't already sold you on, and the grim realities of the world that are not really any less grim than what the game encourages you to do is deemed too much by modern society. Violence, male power fantasies, and the goal of being number one at any cost is all that matters. It's all that you've come here to see, and it's all you're going to leave with. What I really see No More Heroes as is a discussion around the hero's journey. A narrative theory based on a hero of a story journeying through key steps in the narrative to assume an evolved form of their self by the end. This process usually takes the form of a protagonist living a safe life, but being forced to go on a journey or quest to both rid the world of an evil and find self-realization by the end. Somewhere along the journey, the hero may experience an ego death of some kind that deletes their prior self-identity and rewrites it with one that has realized their potential and power. They have evolved the idea of their self to create an entirely new being that wanders off to the unknown world and returns with a completely different outlook on life. Travis Touchdown is stuck in limbo in the midst of an ego death, an inability to change, evolve, or progress in any way. Ego death could also be seen as a pathway to kill the past, to transform the experiences you've had in life into something fundamentally different. Ego death as a term isn't one with one set definition or interpretation though, as it has its feet in psychology, spirituality, and religious contexts too. So my use of the term is strictly rooted in narrative theory and nothing else, and when I look at No More Heroes like this, it makes a lot more sense to me as a package. Travis isn't someone that has the ability to change his ways. He's a lifelong otaku that loves wrestling and really enjoys fighting people and being the winner. That is the entirety of Travis Touchdown as a character. He has no beliefs outside of this. He doesn't give a single shit about anything that a story with a higher purpose would load onto his back, and this is brilliant. It is so rare for a game to place us in the shoes of a guy who has literally only one goal, and that's to be number one. Of course, when you look at the world he inhabits, it's not much of a surprise that he doesn't seek a higher calling. Santa Destroy is not a place where heroes can exist because change isn't something that's valued. The structure of the world is sort of built upon people earning their name and respect in bloodshed, but for the most part it seems like people don't give much of a shit about anything. Travis's need for revenge is built on this idea, but he enacts his role in the story without any knowledge of it for the most part. And when all is said and done, he returns home to his motel without learning anything and literally getting caught with his pants down. But it isn't just Travis that ends up getting caught in this loop. The ending with Jin places us, the players, in a position that's actually far less informed than Travis, where without putting in some extra work, we've got no idea what the main antagonist of this game has for a backstory. We aren't even given the chance as an audience to maybe rethink why we've come this far to become number one. And before you know it, the game starts all over again. There's that motel, with the No More Heroes title meaning more than it ever did before. It wasn't wrong. There are no more heroes in this world, and you've not become any different for playing it than you did 14 hours ago. Neither Travis or the player undergoes any level of change within this experience. No More Heroes doesn't just magically come up with this story on its own, because it's basically what the story of El Topo tries to do as well. El Topo was a major inspiration for No More Heroes since it's where Suda51 got the idea of an assassin's ranking system. The titular character in that film ends up going on a bit of a bizarre spirit journey after all of his battles are over. His hero's journey never really begins because by the time he's completed it, he's not built up his ego or self. It ends up creating a very literal ego death in the sense that the person he's been for most of the film is no more. What comes after is someone that tries to build a life for outcasts of society, foregoing his cold persona from the film's first half. He dances for people's amusement and makes a mockery of himself so that he can raise money to better the lives of the people he's found community with. El Topo's central premise is change and transformation, and whether it's possible for people to do so of their own accord. Whether it actually is possible is up to debate by the end of the story. Maybe it is indeed possible, but the realities of our world make it an impossibility. Or maybe it's our biases that lead us back to the very paths we swore off so long ago. Change may indeed be possible for some, but it's not easy to climb that mountain. Change and ego are concepts that affect almost all of the ranked assassins who all deal with their own struggles. Death Metal lives in a lavish mansion, but to him it's simply a place that people come to die in. Luxury and excess are irrelevant because people die all the same. Dr. Peace ironically loves killing more than anything else, something that clearly forged a rift between him, his ex-wife, and their daughter. Shinobu is a bloodthirsty killer, but also a school student that has to hide her role from all of her friends. She kind of feels like a parody of the typical school kid protag who has to live a double life. And though she desperately believes in honor, she's the one assassin that Travis spares, which goes against her entire perspective on life. I could go on, but I think it's more interesting to skip over to the second ranked assassin, Bad Girl. Bad Girl is a violent and gore-loving assassin, which makes Travis a little uncomfortable, but that in itself is a ridiculous thing to feel considering all the people that he has killed in similarly gory fashion to get to this point in the first place. In a way, Bad Girl is the closest to anyone in the cast to having an ego death and forming a new self after the fact. It's just that her complete self is one that sees criminals as gimps for her amusement. She also calls killing the daily grind, which sums up Travis's experience pretty perfectly. Travis and Bad Girl are mirrors of each other. The only difference between the two is that Bad Girl doesn't lie about what she does and knows that it's sadistic. She just really loves doing it anyway. And I guess you've gotta respect that. She's also the only one that comes as close to killing Travis. By the end of the story, all Travis has left to do is face his long-lost brother Henry. A fight that should mean quite a lot, considering Travis just had to kill his half-sister and may want to reconsider fighting his brother. But nope, the game ends on a very cool fight between two men who want to fight, and that's about it. See, I think No More Heroes is a deep game where it counts, and it's mocking a video game and pop culture. The ways it discusses morality in a world that doesn't really feature it as something meaningful in the grand scheme of things. But I also see No More Heroes as the ultimate parody. It doesn't want to waste time in dealing with elements that fundamentally change the direction of Travis by the end. Travis Touchdown wants to be the #1 ranked assassin, and he's going to do whatever it takes to get there. What are the takeaways from No More Heroes by the end? I can say that I don't really know if there are any. Sure, this is a parody game like I've discussed, and sure, Travis doesn't really progress as a character here in the storyline. But I do think that Suda51 has crafted an experience here where we get to question some things that we automatically assume to be true for most video game experiences. Being the best, being #1, especially on a mountain of corpses, is utterly meaningless. It's the central driving force behind the narrative of No More Heroes. Every single battle you face is based around this. One more fight is one more step up the rung of greatness. But in Sent to Destroy, you eventually realize that the world doesn't really care about your achievements. No one acknowledges Travis's accomplishments. Nothing really changes for him throughout the story. He quite literally gains nothing by the end, but even with that fact, there is still something to take away from all this. It's an objective fact that Travis did achieve something by the end. We can argue whether his journey was fruitless and destructive for no real reason, that it didn't lead to meaningful growth for anyone involved, but that's not all that important. Fighting to be #1 matters when it's something that you really want to do. No real reason has to be given to want to be the best at something. Sure, it'd be nice to have some kind of reason to do certain things in life, but I think a lot of people seek to become better at something for reasons unknown to them. Being #1 means nothing on a grander scale to anyone else, but if that's a goal that you set for yourself, no one can really tell you you're wrong for wanting to achieve it. What this all comes down to in the end is wrestling. Travis's love for wrestling and being strong, cool, the best, charismatic, all begins with his love for wrestling. Wrestling itself is a sport that doesn't make much sense to anyone that looks at it from the outside. Is it real? Is it fake? Is it scripted? Do these guys really hate each other? Is kayfabe dead? What even is kayfabe? Wrestling is a constructed reality by the wrestlers in the ring and the audience in the stands. It's a collective narrative that's formed over weeks, months, years, decades of trust, risk, and suspensions of disbelief. Wrestling isn't necessarily something you can quantify the magic of to someone that doesn't know how it works, but if you do, and you get a friend into wrestling, then they may start to get it. I don't think Travis's journey in No More Heroes is really about getting to the #1 spot. That's provably bullshit by the end as a concept anyway. Being #1 was a goal for him though, regardless, and it's something he achieved. With the help of Shinobu at the very end, of course, Travis may not have grown, learned any lessons, or achieved much of anything by the end, but he survived to tell the tale. And as the very last shot of the game proves, the result of the story created a moment for you, the player, and for Travis Touchdown to reflect on. There may be no more heroes, but that doesn't mean we can't create and stand by our own achievements.
You like this painting, don't you? Let's go, Jin.
And that would be a fantastic message if it really was baked into the game, but honestly I don't think it is. No More Heroes is a game about losers, for losers, and I wouldn't have it any other way. What have we learned today? Well, I'm not sure if we actually learned anything. Oh my god, I'm just like Travis. We're just like Travis. We're stuck in this ball of time and there's no getting out. No More Heroes didn't give me ego death, it gave me ego life.